Are you starting us?
No, just the intro and the ad.
Well, I'll explain it. So we're talking internet safety, right? And some of the stuff that
Last year alone, Avista customers saved over 53 million kilowatt hours of energy, enough to power more than 4,000 homes for an entire year. Way to save, everyone. Way to save. Find your way to save at avistautilities.com.
Welcome to Education 101 with your host, Erik Wolfrum. Education 101 is about the amazing education community we have in the greater Spokane area. We highlight the outstanding programs, teachers, supporters, and opportunities of the education community in the Spokane region. Education 101 is brought to you in part by STCU. Here's Erik.
Welcome to Education 101. I'm Erik Wolfrum. Today we're going to be talking about internet safety. And with me I have Steve Schreiner from ESD 101.
Hi,
and
Erik.
how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. So Steve is the Technology and Learning Coordinator up at the ESD. And Steve, I know you've been doing a lot of work around internet safety lately, and really kind of talking to some of the schools, the local schools. So I'm from the education world. I know it's a big topic. And then also thinking about it from my parent hat point of view, I'm really curious. So what are some of the things that are going on? What are you talking about?
Well, you said it's a big topic, and that's true, but it's also a forgotten topic because everybody has these curricula that they follow within schools, and there's often nothing around internet safety. So
Right.
Kids go to biology class and they go to math class, but they don't go to internet safety class.
And it
So-
seems like all those classes that you're talking about, the big push right now is to really be thinking about how do we use the internet to do research and those kinds of things where internet safety is really going to come into play.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So virtually every teacher that I work with is interested in using the internet with their kids. And yet many teachers themselves have no training on how to use the internet safely or how to monitor the way that kids are using the internet or ways that they can help kids make wise choices. And so that's part of the work that I've been doing lately is helping students and staff understand some of the risks and the rewards of using the internet. So an example, a couple weeks ago I was at Meade High School in the Meade School
Right.
District, and I gave a staff presentation in the morning all about various internet safety topics, and then worked with all the ninth grade, actually not all, half of the ninth grade students, and it's likely that I'll go back later on in a few more months and work with the rest.
And work with some other ones. And in that, is that kind of that topic of how to use it safely? Is that what you're working? So you're working with staff and then also with students as
Yeah,
well?
and those are often different. I mean, they feel like different audiences, and it's because they are. So the way I see it, staff really need to know ways that they can model effective internet use and be aware of some of the hugest risks that kids face online. And then when I work directly with kids, it's often more about storytelling. Like here are, for example, some of the things that other people in the past, and I typically focus on things that adults have done because I don't want to kind of repeat the whole idea of kids making bad choices.
Right,
But bad choices that adults have made online and what repercussions they had.
right. And I'm sure there's multiple stories about that.
You want to hear one?
Yes, I do want to hear one.
Okay. So without the visuals, this isn't as exciting. But here's a story that came out of Arlington, Virginia, at Arlington National Cemetery. So just outside of Washington, D.C. It's
Okay.
America's most hallowed ground for
Right.
war heroes, ex-presidents, others are buried there. And all around there are signs saying silence and respect, because that's the way that we're expected to behave there.
Exactly.
So these young adults flew down from the Northeast for a weekend in Washington, and they went to Arlington National Cemetery and took a photograph right outside the tomb of the unknown soldier. And in the photograph, this young woman is basically making a screaming face. I don't know if she was actually screaming, but that's the photo. And then she had her middle finger up. And within only a couple hours, their employer heard about this. They posted it to social media, and they got a phone call saying, "Don't show up for work. You're fired."
Really?
And that happened. And that's one of so many stories like that.
And just in something where she's being silly or, trying to do some of that, but you put that out there and there's consequences that go along with that.
Absolutely. I mean, I imagine it was probably like a 10-second thought process. Oh, this will be so funny. It's so ironic. I'm at Arlington National Cemetery and I'm doing this.
Oh my gosh.
And it just went totally awry.
Yeah, it did. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
to be able to think about that. And so that's being out in the world. We've got all our devices and everything that kind of go along with it, and definitely I've got a 13-year-old son at home who's got his device that that we use, and yeah, I think that's a tough piece to kind of think about. It's good to hear some of those stories. What are some other things that I'll put my parent hat on? What are some of the other things that I can talk to my son about, or should be talking to him about?
One that adults often wish worked better were filters. So the idea of having this filter set up. And at schools, we have filters. I mean, it's really the law. Schools that accept federal funding are expected to have internet filters in place. So schools do a good job of it, but those filters don't typically extend to home. So it's incumbent on parents to figure out a way to set that up. And most parents, they don't know what to do.
No.
If there's not an easy solution, like setting it up through a cell phone provider, it's not going to happen. So the risk would be you're a kind of uninformed parent, you hand a smartphone to a kid, you haven't set up any sort of filtering system, your kids could access whatever they want. And even if you do know what you're doing and you set up a filter, all it takes is the friend of your kid whose parents are not sophisticated, and the friend hands your child a phone, and now it's an unfiltered internet connection. So the big idea, I think, is the idea that we want filters in our students' minds. So when they come across something that is upsetting or worrisome or makes them question their safety or anything else, that's setting off alarm bells in their mind, and that they feel comfortable to come talk to parents or trusted adults or somebody else.
So it's almost that, we talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic. It's almost that intrinsic piece to try to start to build a culture that you're going to run into some of these things, but when you do, here's how you should react to it. And it's not, but you've got to be able to make good choices and be thoughtful around that.
That's right, Eric. But what we don't often do is model what that looks like. So the school system expects that parents are teaching those lessons at home, and parents largely expect that the school system is teaching those lessons at school. So that's why it's the forgotten curriculum.
Right. It's interesting. I was watching one of the weekend morning shows just a couple weeks ago, and they did a whole story around the whole idea of even devices and getting hacked into the devices, and the hackers being able to take over your device and text people from your device, snap pictures without you knowing it. So there's those pieces as well. I think some of it is like the story that you told, is that whole idea of you've got to make some choices about what you post in the world of social media, but then also I think these had gotten in there based upon some of the fake apps, if you will.
Yep.
So that's another piece. Is that another piece that I don't know if you talk about with schools, but I know it's something that I think about at home and in schools, because we have people that use apps in my department as well out in schools.
The internet is this multi-headed beast, like a hydra or something. So you've got the idea of choices that you make online could come back to haunt you, and that's one head of the beast. Another one is, what if your personal information gets hacked or stolen, and that's another head. And another one is, how do you interact with other people online, and how do they view you? It's just this multi-tiered thing, and we have to worry about each one of those portions.
And almost separately too. I mean, the techniques and tactics and strategies are almost different on each one of those.
So with the kids at Meade, and I've shared this with other kids too, I've taken them through a social media profile of a young girl who I've been following for several years. She's never known that I've used her as an example. She lives in Colorado. And so I show students all of the details of her life that I can figure out including her cell phone number, which she has freely posted online. And then the story becomes, with this info, I could call up Verizon or AT&T or somebody else and pretend to be her, and all of a sudden transfer her phone number to my new SIM card. And now I have complete control over text messages and data and other things. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's terrifying when you really think about it. I mean, that's a great example, not just from the kid's point of view, but just a personal point of view as well. You start to think about, okay, I watch friends post all kinds of things on social media, and then I started to think, if you know what you're doing, what could you find out about them?
Yeah. The whole idea of hacking, it's not really hacking anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's not, there are people who know how to do that. They could sit at a computer and type code that will bypass systems. But in general, we're talking about social engineering. So I figure out details about your life, and then I crack into your accounts based on those.
That's amazing, to be able to do that. And so when you start to think about, you talk about all the different heads of social or the internet safety, I start to think you almost need a class. You mentioned that at the very beginning. You almost need a class and just this ongoing piece to learn how to keep yourself safe in that world.
But good luck, right? I mean, what are we going to cut? Math class?
Oh,
I don't think so.
I don't think that would go over well.
Yeah, it's a really tough decision that educators have to make. The idea would be you integrate it into all of your coursework. But without somebody really taking a lead on it, I don't see it working well.
I agree. And from an educator's point of view, if I'm a math teacher, if you will, am I going to take that kind of time to not just integrate it, and again, it's not whether we should or we shouldn't, but are we going to take the time to do that? And are we going to take the time to be able to get ourselves to a level that we can truly explain it?
Yep.
So, and that's a tough piece. So, Steve, what I think we'll do is, why don't we take a quick break, and then when we come back from the break, why don't we continue to talk a little bit more about internet safety and the multiple heads of doom.
The beast.
Not really. Yes, of the beast.
The internet beast.
All right, we'll be right back after this break.
See you tomorrow night, and thanks again for taking care of the painting.
I got this.
Bye.
Weekends are made for painting. Let the experts at Rada Paint take care of you.
Hi. This looks amazing.
Rada Paint, over 80 years of quality, tradition, and trust. Find it in every can.
To find the right home for you, you'll work with your realtor to compare the properties you're interested in, analyze the market, and figure out a reasonable offer price. And now, here you are, ready to make an offer. Yay, you! Here's how it works. First, you'll complete an offer sheet which your realtor will then present to the owner. Sometimes, a nice note to the owner can help your offer stand out. Butter them up. Tell them how much you love their garden, that it reminds you of gardening with your grandmother as a child. Do not mention you're gonna bulldoze it and put in a pool. The owner may accept the offer, reject it, or counter. It's important to be in close contact with your realtor during the negotiation process so any changes can be reviewed. Your realtor is like your consigliere, and that makes you the Don. Once your offer is finally accepted, there are usually some contingencies that must be met in order to keep the contract alive. Inspections are totally common in real estate transactions. They include termite checks, surveys to determine boundaries, appraisals to determine value for lenders, title reviews, and structural inspections. This stuff is mind-numbingly fascinating. But you know what's even more fascinating? Actually getting your new house.
And welcome back to Education 101. Again, I'm your host, Erik Wolfrum, and with me today, Steve Schreiner from ESD 101, and we're talking internet safety. So before we left, we were kind of talking about internet and how it can be the beast with multiple heads and how we kind of solve that. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the examples. You shared the Arlington Cemetery example, and that 10-second choice caused somebody to lose their job by posting pictures on social media. What are some other examples that kind of help paint the picture of we really do need to be safe and thoughtful when we're out there in the social world?
Well, a lot of these focus on that final outcome of losing a job. So those are two more that I'll tell you about right now.
Great.
So one story, this was actually back in the MySpace days, if you remember.
Oh,
MySpace.
yeah.
There was a teacher in training at a school in Pennsylvania. So she was in graduate school. Maybe not graduate school. She was in school, maybe undergrad or graduate. And she had friended some of her students during her student teaching time. And they were friends on MySpace. And she went to a Halloween party and took a picture of herself, or somebody took it of her, and she's wearing a pirate hat. And that would have been fine, like big deal, right? But the caption on the picture was "Drunken Pirate." And the school where she was doing her student teaching flipped out, and the university flipped out also. And they ultimately ended her student teaching, which meant that she was no longer going to be able to qualify for her education degree.
Yeah.
And so she was, of course, upset and sued in federal court and lost.
Oh, really?
The judge ruled that the university had the right to dismiss her from the program. They didn't expel her or anything. She could still earn a degree, just not that degree.
Wow.
So it's not that she really lost a job, it's that she lost a career path.
Yeah, she lost that opportunity.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thought because, what is that suggestion when we start to hear about teachers and friending students in in Facebook? What is the thought around that?
There are teachers everywhere who successfully do this. So they connect with students online.
Right.
But some of the strategies that I have heard are that they'll create a sub account or a fake account that is not the one that they use with their peers or their adult friends.
Okay.
So they can still have interactions online. Although many new systems are kind of building that in anyway. So learning management systems now often include this social aspect. So there's not really a need, as there used to be, for teachers and students who want to connect online to have to do it through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. There's some more secure or protected ways.
Right. And I think it still happens quite a bit, and I think in some cases it's I'll call it necessity. I don't know. I think about my sons in drama and the way that they do their main communication from the students who are in drama to the directors to even the parents is through Facebook.
Yep.
And so then all of a sudden everybody's connected within that as well.
When 2 billion people worldwide have a Facebook account, it's a natural way to communicate.
I think it probably is. It probably is. But it'd be interesting to take a look at what else is out there. You talk about some of those learning management systems and question whether or not if that's the right way to go for some of these situations. But you're right. There's those that do it well, and obviously those that don't.
Yeah, and so as a result, some schools just give a blanket no. Do not friend students online.
Right.
And so if that's the way it is in a person's district, then follow those rules.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right. What are some other stories? I like these stories.
Another one was a young-ish woman, I think she was in her 30s at the time, who worked, ironically, for an advertising company in New York. And she was taking a long flight all the way to South Africa, connecting in London. So she was a Twitter user, and she gets on the airplane in New York and is about to take off for her flight to London and is posting some kind of dopey things. One of them was about one of her passengers nearby having BO, and then something about cucumbers in London. So nothing really great, but nothing offensive. And then just before she takes off for South Africa, she gets on her phone and she posts a tweet, and this is offensive, but I'll just say it because this is what she wrote. So she said, "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding,
boy.
I'm white." So it's terrible.
No.
Like, don't do that, please.
Yes.
So she posts that on Twitter and then turns off her phone because you don't have cell service when you're flying, across continents. And meanwhile, like during the 12 hours of flight, that tweet became the world's #1 trending topic.
Oh my gosh.
And so by the time she lands in Cape Town and pulls out her phone, she's just getting bombarded with text messages, emails, notifications. She's hearing from people she hasn't communicated with in 10 or 15 years.
Oh my goodness.
And there were protests already set up at the airport for when she landed. She and her family were receiving death threats. And it was all because of this thing that she thought was funny and ironic. And she said later, how could anybody ever think I was being honest about that? Of course I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
But
Still,
people read the words that were posted, and that's what they read.
We don't read tone.
Yeah,
You know, a lot of times.
Exactly.
Amazing. 140 characters.
Yeah, at the time. At the time.
But and it can stir that much controversy within 12 hours.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You really need to be thoughtful about what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Excuse me. You know, one of the other big topics that's out there, and I think that I hear this a lot with social media especially, is bullying. And
it's rampant.
Yeah, and so what's going on with that? What are some of the suggestions that, whether it's an educator, administrator, counselors, or even on the parent side, what can we do? What do we need to look out for, maybe? Maybe that's a better question.
Okay, what to look out for would be that kids are feeling that they're being bothered, harassed, intimidated. I mean, harassment, intimidation, bullying is what we really talk about. But what are the signs of that? It would be like ongoing, continued, mean commentary towards an individual person.
Okay.
So the huge downside is that when you and I were in school and without 24/7 access to tech, I mean, maybe somebody would say something mean about us, either to our face or behind our backs, but it didn't last all day or into the coming weeks and months. Whereas now, a mean post can have an indefinite lifespan.
Right.
So what to look out for? I mean, you would look for signs that your child or student doesn't want to go to school or isn't interested in things that they've been interested in the past. But getting them to talk about it is a challenge because they all view it as, if I tell mom or dad about this, they're going to take my phone away. And that's not what they want. So it's this delicate balance between kids wanting to use devices, but prioritizing that over sometimes their own emotional safety.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I think, I think that you talk about the bullying and what to look out for, and that's any typical bullying as well, you know, not wanting to go to school and those kinds of things.
Yep.
But at the same time, you're right. You know, you think about in the past, and it was a few days or, you know, the old meet behind the dumpster kind of thing, but now it's there.
Now
and
it's going to be,
there.
I'm going to live stream my hatred towards you.
That's right.
And all of your classmates are going to know about it.
Right. And it's going to stick around.
Yep.
It's not gone. It's there, and you can go back and find it and bring it back out.
Yep.
And so that's a huge change in the world, and that's hard from a parenting point of view, I think, and from a teacher's point of view and administrators. What are the rules around bullying? And I'll use like social media bullying from a school's point of view, that responsibility piece. You know, I think that's, you know, where do the lines get drawn on that?
It's challenging because things that happen outside of school aren't necessarily things that principals or administrators can deal with until they have a large impact at school.
Okay.
So that's the differentiation is this having a significant impact at school, even if the actual posts or communications are happening outside of school hours.
Right.
But yes, it can be dealt with. There have been Supreme Court cases where the Supremes have decided that certain things done within the school to deal with bullying situations are okay, and other times are not. And I'm no legal expert, but I can tell you that virtually every principal that I've ever worked with has a pretty good sense of what can be dealt with at school and what can't.
And what can't. Yeah, I would imagine that that's a big piece that they would need to know for being an administrator nowadays, because that's a huge piece. What are some of the other things that you talk about with the districts? Whether it's Meade, whether it's Washtenaw, I know you've worked with them as well.
Yeah.
So
we talk about ways that the internet can be used as a real positive force. So I like to focus on creativity and having students make and develop and publish things. And it doesn't matter what those things are. So essays, creative writing, video productions, whatever. That's exciting to me. So the internet is, I mean, as we all know, it's this amazing connection. You can create something amazing
Right.
and have an audience of thousands.
Absolutely.
So that's the
Easily.
beauty of it for me, is that it's this unbelievable tool that connects us and teaches us in a way that we've never been taught before. But there's also these risks that are associated with it. So I like to try to emphasize the really positive things that kids can do, the positive things that staff can do, and just be honest with both teachers and students what the risks are and how they might overcome those.
Right. I like the idea of that, the positive in the publishing and some of those kinds of things. So what are some of the coolest things you've seen teachers do with the internet lately?
Okay, so coolest, I don't know. That's tough to say because there's so much amazing stuff out there. Let me just give a few examples.
Yeah.
So there is a school in Central Valley that every day publishes a student-created news broadcast. So as part of the everyday life of these students, they go out and they record footage and ultimately assemble it into this package that is then distributed throughout the school via the internet, and that's their news broadcast for the day. And then it's additionally posted online so that people at home, parents, uncles, whatever, they can see it too. And I think that's exciting that you have middle school kids that are making their own content like that. I've worked with high schoolers that have developed digital portfolios and then publish those, kids who create art projects and then create accounts online to distribute their art to an audience far beyond their school walls.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just exciting stuff.
That really is. I mean, that's so amazing to be able to think about. And again, that's the joy of the internet, is there's so many possibilities when used correctly.
Yeah.
You know, and used safely, because I think that those are the waves of the future. You know, we talk a lot about the idea that when we're prepping kids for jobs, you know, what do they say? 65% of those jobs haven't even been created yet.
Absolutely.
You know, and so when we start to think about that and think about what possibilities in the digital realm are out there, it's pretty amazing. You know, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to kind of end this conversation on some positive pieces of how powerful the internet can be for education, because that's how it should be used, you know. But at the same time, as we mentioned throughout the conversation, it's that idea that we need to be thoughtful, we need to be very careful as we kind of go through it, and I think we need to be informed, and I think that's the big piece that goes along with it. So, Steve, if there's any administrators out there that want you to come out and have a talk with their staff or with their students, what's the best way? Probably email to get a hold of you.
Yeah, email sschereiner@esd101.net.
Wonderful. Steve, thanks for being on the show today.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully you got some information about internet safety and how important that really is. And so I hope to see you next week on Education 101. Thanks.
Education 101 is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Education 101 is brought to you by our friends at STCU. Ask Erik a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Welcome to Education 101 with your host, Erik